interested in your Twitter account as well as your Bitcoin story. So how did you get involved in Bitcoin? We can start there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I basically started in Bitcoin around 2017. Just heard about it and was pretty curious. So I started doing some reading, some research and stuff. And yeah, just really like the idea of, of money that you can actually control by yourself. And, that is permissionless, that you don't need a bank or anything to approve you to use your own money. So I was really interested by the idea. So I was reading about it for nonstop for a while. Then yes, my background it was in software development, so that was like my general approach to it. And at first I was also dragged into some shitcoins and stuff. But eventually, yeah, I understood that I have to focus only on Bitcoin. So I just, yeah, I was just looking to contribute as an open source developer on Bitcoin projects. I did some, some general contributions like in BISC and stuff, like some small things. And then I started contributing to Spectre Wallet, Spectre Desktop, which I've done for the last about year and a half. I've been working on the project until basically last week. That's basically my background in Bitcoin.
Can you tell me a little more about the Spectre Wallet and what made this project particularly stand out to you from other wallets? Some main differences between them, maybe?
Yeah, so Spectre was basically just when I first tried it, I was looking for a way to, to use my own node for, hardware wallets and stuff like that, because there was already Electrum that was out by then, like Electrum with, you could use it with your personal Electrum server, but it was very difficult to set up. Even for a technical guy like me, it was, a pain in the ass to set up. So I was looking if there's a way to just use it with Bitcoin Core, and Spectre was basically the solution for that. So I just started, playing around with it and submitting, some small fixes and stuff that I found. And just, from general small contributions, I just started doing more and more stuff because I just love the project.
Nice. And where does it stand today? Like, how much of your time does it take up working on development for Spectre?
Yeah, so I've just left Spectre last week. I've been doing it. Yeah, I've been doing it part-time for like a year and then half a year for full-time, more or less. I think, yeah, I'm about half a year full-time on it. And then, yeah, and last week I've left basically the project. I'll still be around, like maybe doing some small open source contributions or, and advising and giving support if anything is needed. But officially I've stepped down from the project.
So what do open source contributions and just the whole ecosystem of open source software? I'm not a technical person, so maybe you could explain briefly why that is important in Bitcoin and why we have to promote that.
Yeah, so Bitcoin is an open source project by itself. Everything that is based on all its ethos, everything around it is based on open source software. The idea is simply, software that is open to use, open to share, open for development. People can read the code, can improve the code, can use it however they see fit. This is basically the way that that Linux was created. That everything that basically every major software that we have today is based on open source to some extent, at least. It's it's a way for people, for developers and people in general to collaborate and improve on each other's works in an incredible way.
Yeah, and in terms of like Bitcoin Core, what has that been like, being a part of that process or just looking at it as a software developer? What is the state of Bitcoin Core? Because for someone who's not technical, I mean, it seems like very unavailable. Like, I don't know about Bitcoin nearly on the level that you do.
Mhm. Yeah, so Bitcoin Core is basically it's just a software. After all, it's just a software project. It's extremely, the code is has to be extremely well reviewed all the time and extremely well maintained. But it's software like any other software. It's code basically. The process for contributing is very open. It's as an open source project. Everybody is just can review the code, can submit changes, suggest changes, and find issues, etc.
So what is the benefit of making continued changes? There's a lot of advocates for Taproot, and like, well, I agree and think like generally this would be good, I guess, for people who want to use smart contracts, things like this. It seems to me, like from an outsider perspective, that these also bring more security risks because you have a risk of new bugs. So what I've always wondered is, does Bitcoin need to be changed at all, or could it stay in the way it is and still run?
Mhm. Yeah, so technically it could stay in the way it is and still run to some extent. I mean, there are some bugs like in the year, I think 2100 and something and '06, I think. I don't remember exactly right now for sure, but there are some bugs that will have to be fixed in a few decades. But in general, it could run more or less like it is now. But there are always a door for like it's always good to have improvements. Improvements like Taproot are basically consensus changes. These are like the most difficult and most controversial types of changes. But it's by no means it's the only changes that's happening in Bitcoin Core. So there is always work in Bitcoin Core. There is always improvements and basically changes to the code base. Uh, but most of them by far are not changing the consensus mechanism basically like Taproot does, because this part is extremely sensitive and extremely difficult to handle. But there are a lot of parts, that are not, consensus critical specifically, but are still everything is still important, but that are less sensitive, from the wallet functionality that is in Bitcoin Core and the RPC server, to stuff that is more sensitive like block propagation or transaction propagation, the mempool management. So there are basically a lot of different parts in Bitcoin Core that are not just the consensus itself, and that technically you could leave them as is, and right now Bitcoin is working, but there's always an opportunity to improve and to make it better and more resilient, and just in general improve it.
Is there a space restriction for the whole of the Bitcoin software? Um, or is there do you try to keep things as concise as possible, or how do those considerations come into play when adding new code?
Yeah, so in general, the review process in Bitcoin Core is extremely uh, difficult to go through, I would say. It's very, in order to get something merged into Bitcoin Core, you would usually have to go through a few other developers that would look through your code, comment on every single thing that doesn't seem exactly, in the best way that it could be. So it's a very tiring process to write changes to and uh, make changes into the Bitcoin code. And there's always stuff that could be improved. So there's always, even for, not just for new contributors, even the veteran contributors, let's put it that way, are going through a very rough process of review to get their code in. So it's always difficult to make changes, and that's a good thing. That means it goes for a lot of review, and a lot of testing, just just to make sure that everything stays fine and everything still works.
So how much of a think tank is there around like the GitHub and making contributions? Do developers have communication with each other prior to making suggestions, or is it only after the fact in review that you kind of come together to discuss changes?
It can be both ways. So normally the regular contributors, or they have lots of chats and meetings, etc., and to discuss changes or discuss everything basically. But it is possible as well to just write a piece of code for to change stuff, and if it makes sense, you could suggest it. People will review it and either approve or ask for changes if there is something to improve in the change. Yeah, so it's in general, yeah, that there is a lot of discussions on how to improve stuff, but it is not impossible to just suggest something and write the code.
So, what are your thoughts on Taproot? Is everything as it should be with that? Is everything that you'd like to see in that upgrade coming, or are you more concerned with other kinds of changes?
Yeah, I think Taproot was fairly well reviewed, and I think it's ready. And we're nearly getting it really soon. So I think, yeah, it's been in development since the activation of Segwit, so for a few years already. I think the idea for it was proposed even before Segwit was implemented. So in general, everything is takes a few years to from idea to code to code review to being merged to being activated, and now and now Taproot is nearly ready to be activated. And I think this is I think Taproot is a very interesting update. There are obviously a lot of other stuff that could be nice to have, like SIG has no input. And there are other protocol changes proposed that could be discussed. But I think Taproot itself is pretty much non-controversial and pretty interesting change.
Yeah. Do you are you interested in Lightning? Interested in contributing to Lightning development at all, or where are you at with that?
So I'm not sure about Lightning specifically. I mean, I think it's a great subject and it's very interesting. I haven't worked with it closely at all myself, to be honest, and so I think my expertise is more on a different side, more working with hardware wallets or multisig, and I think I would like to continue on that side. But in general, I think Lightning development is very interesting, and there is a lot of great work that's being done there.
Yeah. So, how does this translate into your other kind of like more fun side gig online, which is like an extremely entertaining kind of, I don't know what you call it, a satire account?
Mhm. Yeah, so basically, I think I'm just trying to, I don't, I'm used to being very active on Twitter for the last year or 2 years. It's nothing new to me. So I'm just doing it from a new account right now, and it's been going pretty well, I'd say. And I don't think it's in any way a problem for for developing as well. I can do open source contributions, and I can do in the rest of my time this maintain this Twitter account. It's not something that I'm like not used to. It's just a new account this time.
It's very entertaining, and it seems to have leveled up recently because I think more and more people are seeing kind of the ridiculousness and the hypocrisies that you're pointing out every day out there. So what's been on your mind lately in terms of maybe like global politics or things outside of Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think in general, as I write in the newsletter and post on the Clown Wall Today Twitter account, I think there's a lot that's been going on lately in a very bad direction. I think in general, all the restrictions and all the basically the totalitarianism that's been going on around the world lately. We're going in a very bad direction in many parts of the world, and that's quite worrying.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And the need for Bitcoin seems more and more greater every day. Um,
Hmm.
so I wonder, do you cross over to those things? Is there a way that you evangelize for Bitcoin in your day-to-day life outside of working on it? I mean, do you have like a strategy for getting people up to speed on Bitcoin, or how does that look for you?
I'm not. I don't have a specific strategy. I'm just always happy to help to with for anyone that is that is asking questions or want to know stuff. I'm usually available for anyone that wants, as far as I have time for that. But I do try to have some time to to ask for people that are asking questions and stuff like that.
So, what do you think? Do you worry about proprietary software and banks kind of co-opting the custody of wallets and exchanges?
Mhm.
Or do you think it's
Um,
natural? Like, I don't know.
in to some extent, it is natural that there are exchanges and custody solutions for some certain companies and stuff. But in general, I think it's extremely important. That's part of why I was working on Spectre. I think it's extremely important that people will self custody, that they will hold their own keys, that they will use their own node. I think that's extremely important for Bitcoin security in general. So yeah, I think to some extent, especially for newcomers or highly regulated companies that have no choice really, using custody providers to some extent is inevitable. But in general, I think holding your Bitcoin by yourself is extremely important.
Yeah. And what's that going to look like as we go forward? I really enjoy this like competing space for hardware solutions. I like to try out different wallets. Which, I mean, you can talk about like a specific wallet or what solution you think the more secure Bitcoiner will have in the future. Are we all going to be on multisig, or how does that play out?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think there are a lot of interesting directions. I mean, if you're just trying to secure a small stack, then maybe a mobile wallet would suffice. It all depends, on how much security versus convenience you need. For larger amounts, maybe you need a hardware wallet. And for larger amounts, maybe even a multi-sig wallet. In the future, I think collaborative custody could be a lot more interesting and a lot easier. Right now, it's still, still in the beginning of it. There are some solutions, but it's still quite early for it, in my opinion. And we could possibly even see some more interesting, schemes for, for securing Bitcoin, where it's, for example, you have um, um, a service provider that has one key and you have two keys, and after 5 years it changes so that you only need one of the three keys, or a lot of ways that with time locks and different time deadlines, basically the schemes can change. Taproot can also be very useful for that type of stuff. um, but in general, I think this could be quite interesting to see in the future.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that. Is that something you've tried out? A time locked multisig?
So I've played with the concept just a little bit, but I think we'll see a lot more of it in the future. Right now, there's still not, I'm not aware really of anything that's available for that. But in general, I think that's an interesting concept.
Yeah. The other interesting kind of cold storage solution that was happening lately that I heard about was exor. Are you interested in exor seed phrase, or is this kind of an overcomplicating of seed storage, or what do you think about it?
So I haven't looked into it so much, to be honest. So far, remember seeing it from Cold Card,
Mhm.
but I haven't looked at it so much. So I would not comment on it, to be honest, just because I didn't look at it.
Yeah, sure.
I think
Um,
it's for securing just like the backup, just the seed words. Um, but I don't remember exactly how it's done.
yeah, I think it basically just divides your seed words into two and pairs them with new words. So now instead of managing one, you've in a way got two seed plates to manage. But if someone were to get a hold of one, they probably could not recreate the other, brute force the other.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
yeah, there seems to be a lot of interesting solutions out there. Do you think there's any hope for very traditional companies, like a Square or a Twitter, like these developments that Jack is hoping to make in this space? Do you think there's a future, or is there any promise and things like that, or will it always be kind of open source developers collaborating under the scenes?
Yeah, I think in general that Jack is doing a lot of interesting initiatives with Square Crypto, with their new project that I was hearing that they're discussing TP, TBC, TBD, something
TBD, yeah.
TBD, TBD. Um, they were basically discussing that. That sounds interesting. I think in general, it's even if it's by some big company, there is no reason why it won't be an open source project. I think in general, as more companies will start to integrate Bitcoin, they will or start buying Bitcoin, they will have a greater interest in its security, in its infrastructure, and they will start contributing more into it and its development. But in general, I think everything will stay more or less open source and with that attitude.
Yeah, it seems to be the best way to, well, obviously get things done transparently. It seems to me that like patents and copyright claims on ideas have gone a long way to actually hinder progress in many ways. And so I was wondering, as an open source developer, I mean, what do you think about this patent business? It seems like the only way to enforce these things is basically through coercion or threat of a lawsuit, and no one can really have a legitimate claim to the ownership of an idea.
Mhm. Yeah, I think patents and and all of that is quite a different subject that is basically enforcing rights on an idea, on something abstract. I'm definitely not in favor of patents or anything, and I think patent trolling can be a pretty big problem. I think there is this another initiative from Jack or Square for anti-patent trolling stuff in the crypto space. Um, I don't remember right now its name, but I think they do have some initiative to prevent that. In general, I think everything is better off being open source and being shared as an idea between people rather than hidden.
So, how do you feel about someone like an Umbral coming out and basically, from what I understand, half of the public like Lightning Network is running on Umbral software just out of convenience. Is that a danger to Bitcoin? I mean, I'm not sure I'm technical enough to understand, but could they implement some unseen change somehow if they got a majority of nodes? Or how do we make sure Bitcoin stays distributed and open source in terms of node runners?
Yeah, so in general, Umbrel code is open to read. You can look for it and see the changes. You probably don't compile it yourself, like most of the people. probably don't compile it themselves, which means you, if at least you verify the signatures, then you're at least trusting the developers. But at least, and again, there is some kind of trust here. But I think in general, this is, a lot of Lightning nodes indeed, I think, run on Umbrel, but Lightning is not that big of a risk for Bitcoin in general. And a lot of Bitcoin nodes also run on Umbrel, and again, that could be some risk, but I don't think that the amount of Bitcoin nodes running there is significant enough to have any, any risk for the network as a whole.
Mhm. Are there risks that would keep you up at night, or that have any legitimate claim on Bitcoin right now to the network?
I mean, there can always be something unexpected. There can always be an unexpected bug or an unexpected development in cryptography, and or in that could basically either break the cryptography of Bitcoin or the hashing algorithm. But this is extremely improbable, I would say. So I wouldn't worry too much about this stuff, at least not for now. And in general, I would say there are some risks. For example, if not enough people are running their own nodes, if there is a lot of trust in a few companies that are validating transactions for people, this can be quite some risk. But I think, as we've seen from Segwit, Saga, and everything there, I think a lot of people do run their own nodes and are vigilant about that. So I think Bitcoin is pretty well, is doing pretty well in terms of security.
Yeah, yeah, that's good to hear. I'm excited, and I hope that the nodes grow in proportion to the adoption rate. As we see, kind of like inversely, as the number goes, to a new height, more people come in at that point. Like, that's their entry point. So we'll probably lose a lot of them, but some are definitely going to stick around, and hopefully stick around for the Bitcoin. What do you think about all this price mania that's happening right now?
Yeah, so we just had a new all-time high yesterday. It was quite fun. But I think in general, the price is extremely important to fund the work on Bitcoin. If the price of Bitcoin is very low, then there will be very little funding for developers, very little funding for everything basically in the around Bitcoin, and in general, very little traction. So of course, I think the price going up is extremely important in terms of for development, in terms of of adoption and sustainability of the project in general. But yeah, the price will continue to to swing and and move in terms of dollars. The dollars is just too unstable to measure.
Yeah, yeah. You can't pair anything with a terminally scarce asset and not see some crazy things appear to happen. But that's an interesting point I hadn't considered. So, are you saying that more people have the wealth to contribute to core contributors and developers, or that the developers tend to hold their wealth in Bitcoin and therefore they have more money and time to work?
I would say both is likely.
Yeah. Do you know, is that how, like, some of your work gets funded? Do you get paid in Bitcoin as a developer from sources, or you don't have to answer that?
I get some donations from time to time. I was basically, yeah, when I was doing it as an just part time, I was just doing it on my free time, not as a job. And then when I started doing it full time, I got some salary for that. But in general, yeah, I think both is correct. I mean, and there's also, when the price is higher, there's also more incentive for people. There's higher stakes. So they have to, to make sure that this thing is actually being secured well.
Yeah, excellent point. So, is there like a competition dynamic among developers? Like, are there, I know there's like kind of a hierarchy of like Bitcoin core maintainers, or maybe at least different titles that people, like a small group of people have in that light. But how does that work? Like, what is it like politically? Like, how do you become like a leader of the developers, or is it all just consensus? Like, what does it look like on the inside?
It's very hard to say. I mean, the lead contributor is basically just the guy with the with the most commit access, with the like most managing access on the repository, basically where the code is stored and maintained. But in general, it doesn't have to, people can use another code, like another code base. There are a few other implementations, for example, in other programming languages, um, for Bitcoin, basically for the Bitcoin software. So Bitcoin Core is one of them, and it's by far the most popular, but it's not the only one or necessarily the only one. So the title, like right now, of the like the lead developer of Bitcoin Core is, it's the guy with the most commit access, with the most like management access for the repository for Bitcoin Core. And it is a lot of responsibility for sure, but it is not, but it's not like, it's very, very, very limited power, I would say. And in general, I think there are 5 people right now that can actually commit to the like approve code, basically, and merge it, like add it to the Bitcoin repository. um the process is all very transparent in that sense, and the people were just getting this right because they were extremely involved for a very long time and have done a lot of work and a lot of contributions for a very long time. But in general, there are a lot of developers. Only 5 has these commit access because it's not such a great power to have that. It's quite a lot of responsibility, but in the end, everybody can see what you're doing, and if you would become malicious or do some crazy stuff, either you will lose your commit rights, um, or or people will just use another implementation or another repository for it. So it's not like it's not like it's an unlimited power. It's extremely limited power, that even the core developers have.
So are commit rights cryptographically maintained? Can maybe other members revoke? Like, let's say one of these 5 contributors does go rogue. How do you go about revoking their access to make changes?
I think it's Vladimir, like the lead developer, that can basically revoke the access for others right now. If that goes wrong, then the people can always notice that and move to another repository where another person is maintaining that. So yeah, it's very limited power, and there is not a lot really interest for anyone to to do stupid stuff, because it will just you will just lose your influence and your work, and for no reason, really, for nothing.
Yeah, and even if it were like somehow feasible for one of these people to break Bitcoin, they've just disincentivized their whole wealth and network. Like, it goes the incentives are aligned for us to maintain this network in most cases.
Yeah, they can only write code, but the code is not immediately going to to everybody that is running the nodes. So node operators have to then manually update the code that they are running. So they manually have to install a new version of Bitcoin. And if if the developers on Bitcoin Core are becoming malicious or anything, then people will just not use the code. Basically, people will just just avoid upgrading to the new code that is bad.
So one thing I've wondered about is the importance of having a private server and more privacy when doing these things. So I was wondering if you had a couple privacy tools or tips for like the average person, let's say, that wants to run their own node that maybe they don't use in their fiat life. They come over to Bitcoin and now it's like, you need to start using a VPN, you need to get your own node, your own like server, something like that.
Yeah, so I think projects like Umbrel or MyNode or Start9 Embassy, or all of these projects are doing a lot of very interesting stuff in ensuring best practices, routing everything through Tor and stuff like that, and making it quite easy for people to just plug and play with their own node. And I think now they're Umbrel and Start9 and maybe also MyNode, I'm not sure, offering all these sorts of applications, both Bitcoin related and in general some file storage on your own, like a cloud storage that is self-hosted and all of that type of stuff. So yeah, I think right now all these services are doing a very good job making it accessible for everybody to to just plug and play without having to worry too much about the technical details.
Yeah, that's excellent. So what do you think going forward? Like, what is the immediate future besides or including Taproot hold for Bitcoin? What do you hope to see? Is there a price target that you have? What do you think the future will look like from soon?
I think the price will continue to go up. I don't have any price target or anything, but I just think it will continue to go up for now. It doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon, to be honest, from this trend so far. But besides that, yeah, I don't have any specific price target or anything. And in the terms of the development, so now we're finally, active. Taproot is about to be activated, but now there will be all the work of implementing it on wallets and on then also hardware wallets and exchanges and everything. So for example, on Spectre, we already have implemented that, but the hardware wallets themselves didn't implement yet support. So you could use it technically with the with either with Spectre DIY, like the hardware wallet that Spectre develops, or you could use it with your as a hot wallet on your own computer. But to use it with Trezor or Ledger or Cold Card will take more time until they offer official support for that. So yeah, I mean, there's still a lot to wait for from Taproot. And then also, not just supporting Taproot, but to see, the more advanced use cases that it can bring, like more advanced scripts, for example. It's something that will take a while until you see, the benefits and the results of Taproot. So I'm excited to see that.